Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We are going to be talking about lead generation essentials for economic development with a focus on foreign direct investment today. We're very happy to have you all with us. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy days. So with that, I would like to start off with introductions. I am very happy to have Amber Hunter and Davor Davidovic from Research Consultants International with us today on the line, as well as Stevie Field-Chavez, my colleague from GIS Planning. Hello, Amber and Davor and Stevie. Hello to all of you.
Hello, everyone.
Hi there.
Hello, everyone.
So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to hand the baton over to you, Amber. You're going to be the presenter, and I will let you go ahead and begin the presentation, let everyone know what we're going to be talking about. And then after that, we'll pass it over to Stevie, who will talk about lead generation from the website and data perspective.
Perfect. Can everyone see our screen?
We can, yes, looks good.
Okay, excellent. So thank you all for being here today. My name is Amber Hunter, and I am the Vice President of Business Development in the North American market for Research Consultants International. Just a brief little background on our firm. We work primarily in lead generation, so we assist economic developers, IPAs, investment promotion agencies in Europe, as well as utility providers in helping them attract inward investment both domestically and foreign domestic attraction as well. So what we also provide is training a lot of the time for our clients when they want to create a strategy. Either we can be more hands-on and write it ourselves, or we can kind of give them the building blocks when they're setting out to do so. So me and Davor really wanted to focus today just sort of niche on FDI attraction strategies. So what we can do is we're going to kind of give you a full spectrum of what we do in-house ahead of a FDI program, so the research that we would do for a client. And also these are turnkey kind of services of what we can offer for clients if they want to build their own strategy. But a lot of these services or tools you can utilize yourself in-house to build your own strategy. So I'm going to discuss some of the market-entered strategies and some trends that we analyze and why they're important and what to look out for. And then Davor is going to dive in onto actual FDI strategies when you're going in market and a lot of the online tools you can use to help you, that some are paid services and some are free. So we're going to dive right in there. Obviously, at the outset of understanding what foreign direct investment you're trying to attract, the most important thing we would wager is to look at what are the drivers for the potential client that you're looking at. So there are four main drivers that we see most of the time. This is globally. So the first one can typically be a resource FDI driver, which is directed toward markets which have an abundance of natural resources. So, typical African countries would constitute for this. However, there is a kind of paradox in that what they call the natural resource curse, so to speak, which that means is that countries typically that have an abundance of natural resources tend to have less economic growth and less democracy. Therefore, they're less attractive for FDI. So it's kind of a double-edged sword for that driver. Another main driver is a market driver. So when investors are looking to be closer to key clients in a new market, a new country, avoid potential high exporting costs and tariffs, and to use local resources, i.e. manufacture in market to key clients. A third one is efficiency-seeking FDI. This one is typically driven by low labor costs and higher productivity. In this case, these are generally directed towards cheap labor and large supplies, sort of your China and Vietnamese manufacturing developments. We've seen a lot. I know China is a sore spot right now, but that's where we see a lot of that drive. Then the fourth would be asset-driven. So that's FDI driven by access to new complementary resources and capabilities. This type of investment is typically motivated by a firm's desire to improve or expand its existing technologies or labor force. We think it's key to look at these drivers because it allows you to have a clear understanding of your prospect or your client, depending on the stage of your conversations with a company, and it also helps you understand the potential that your location holds as a host for potential investment. So then a particular trend, I mean, we're going to look at the state level. Obviously, the United States remains the largest single recipient of FDI in the world. But, it's still important for the U.S. to remain competitive, and we're going to look at other states afterwards, because then the argument goes, how do states compete against, stronger powerhouses in the FDI game, in attracting foreign direct investment. Something you can see here is that the business activity in the U.S., the number one or the strongest sector for attracting FDI is in the service sector. And incidentally, we looked, and that mirrors the global trends. So not just into the U.S., but into all markets from foreign markets. That seems to be the main target for foreign acquisitions, and then followed by manufacturing. When we look at this data, when we're trying to build a plan for our clients, we think it's important because it helps you and us explore how and where companies from around the world are investing, and understanding which industry sectors at the top of the list, and the overall investment levels. It just keeps you in the know of what trends are important and where the projects are coming from. So these are the top countries investing in the U.S. Your typical major players such as the UK, Canada, Japan, and Germany. And this data is important so that it can tell you where to look, which countries to target. But we would like to argue that it is just as important to keep an eye on the fastest growing sources of FDI in the USA, such as countries like Argentina and Thailand that are emerging dominant players in FDI. And a second caveat is that these emerging markets, sometimes they're less inundated by requests from investors, so you might sometimes have more of a chance in reaching those decision makers. I recently met with a client who spoke to me about his main goal was attracting investment from Serbia, and I asked why, and he said that when he goes there, because hardly anyone goes to Serbia, he gets the governor, he gets all of the politicians to bring him to all of the meetings. So, whether or not you want to attract from Serbia is a different conversation. But some of these markets, they're not feeling the love, shall we say. So it's important to kind of get in there and show them, and show them that, that they're top of mind.
Yeah.
So another trend that we look at, if you look here, is we actually compared the state's percentage of number of FDI projects versus the state breakdown of their GDP. So this can kind of show you, you see your major players. I mean, a lot of times when I talk to economic developers, they always typically say that Texas is kind of the strongest, player in attracting investment. And you can see here, while I know working with a lot of Texas that they're very good at what they do, you can see that they're below or just at even with their GDP. So they're not one of the states that are punching above their weight in attracting FDI, such as California, New York, Massachusetts, Georgia, Michigan. States that are in the top 10 of GDP in the U.S. and are not in the top 10 of FDI include Pennsylvania and New Jersey. It's important to look at this data because it can show you what your competitors are doing and also the people that are lagging behind. That data can kind of show you both strategies and where to research. So who is successful and why are they not successful? Both of those outcomes can kind of help you fine-tune your own FDI strategy plan and build upon, their successes and, their non-successes, because both hold keys to what you need to do to kind of fine-tune that. So this is just a really broad overview of data that we analyze before we even, break down the research of which type of program we're going to utilize to attract that FDI, and what are the tools we'll do, in uncovering these prospects. So this is where our resident savant, when it comes to technology, Davor, is going to come in, and he's going to really dive deep into what are the best tools and what are the strategies that, will help you propel your pipeline for FDI.
Perfect. Thank you, Amber. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the strategies, again, that we use for our clients, as well as some of the strategies that you can utilize yourselves. So ultimately, there are 6 boxes here, as you can see, or 6 pillars for foreign direct investment attraction. One of them is obviously, trade shows. Typically, a lot of economic developers attend trade shows. simply because it's probably the best way to gain that international exposure, especially if your budget is somewhat limited and you would like to gain that, I guess you could say, international footprint. So shows like, Hannover Messe, Bio, Paris Air Show, CES, Farnborough, Dubai Air Show, and things like that, depending on obviously the industries that you're targeting, are a great way to get that international exposure. Another way is obviously road shows where you would visit and have one-on-one meetings with companies in your target sectors. What I always say to our clients, whenever you do something like that, it's very, very important to have that product prepared, meaning not necessarily just talk about the benefits of locating in your region and or advantages, but also have a full product ready, meaning, knowing more about the available facilities, the free zones that you may have, the programs, the soft landing programs you may have. And soft landing is something that is, I guess you could say, very important because, especially for foreign direct investors, meaning international companies, when they hit international markets or the U.S. market, it's, as you saw in Amber's part of the presentation, the number one activity would be sales and marketing / support offices. So those are the types of investments or sales subsidiaries. So those are the types of investments that we see most often. International companies typically need a lot of hand-holding. It's very different to your domestic investment attraction. So, for them to make a decision, they really need to understand that regional offer and what ultimately you guys can do for them should they decide to locate in your region. Another strategy that you can do is you can do a regional audit. Typically, those are done by FDI consultants, obviously professionals in our little ecosystem that develop your strategies, your a 3-year business plan or your 5-year business plan. So this is when you ultimately meet with international companies that are located in your region and sort of try to understand what attracted them, what was the motive behind that expansion in your neck of the woods. Another thing that you can also do is elaborate a bit more, try to better understand who are their partners from their domicile countries, and perhaps create some relationships and ultimately generate new leads from those conversations as well. Your trade boards, if you have any, and or sort of trade organizations, perhaps even some associations that you have in your region, could do some of their own outreach and or missions into international markets. You also want to obviously partner with them and to sort of talk to companies and advise them that perhaps having a location again in your region would be a good idea, simply because companies that have business in your region are more likely to locate there in the future, or at least consider your region for future expansion. Research, so obviously, you want to partner with local, state, or regional groups that are doing these international missions and try to sort of better understand what are the regions that are targeting and what is the outcome, meaning what are the results. Local partners are also very important, especially, in Asian markets. It's very, very, difficult to generate one-on-one meetings in particular markets such as Japan, China, South Korea. Their business or type of running their businesses is somewhat different than, it is in Europe or North America. So it's also very important to have a local partner there for lead generation purposes. And, one of the best examples that I can give you, a lot of southeastern, I guess you could say, U.S. states back in the day have established offices in Germany, and in more recent years, they've been able to attract a lot of German investments throughout the southeast of the United States. Some other methods, like I was saying, again, and this sort of goes in hand with that regional offer that I was explaining before. So having these partnerships with regional associations, site selectors, accountants, lawyers, trade boards, and so on and so forth is ultimately what completes the product and what completes the offer or the proposition that you can put in front of that international company. Again, a lot of success has been done in southeastern United States, where when they do their trade missions to Germany or the UK or Italy or Spain, they typically bring a lot of these partners from that economic development ecosystem that can advise companies even further as to what sort of services would potentially be available should they locate in their region. Another way of getting that international exposure are obviously speaking engagements, especially at large trade shows. You can also perhaps even do workshops at some of them. So again, it gives you that brand recognition. It gives you your name, puts it out there, and again, companies are more likely to consider your region for future growth and expansion. Annual meetings. So we always propose to our clients to have annual meetings with local businesses and chambers of commerce, as well as international investors, simply to complete that ecosystem. And again, new leads can come up through your annual meetings, annual dinners, and so on and so forth. In terms of some tools that we use, I normally like to start with the CRM system, which can be optimized to be also your map or your marketing automation platform. So, not a lot of economic developers still to date use a CRM system. So it's not necessarily just to track your results or your progress, but also to promote your region a little bit better. Again, to have that marketing automation automatically done by a platform, sort of push notifications to your potential leads, and also you can use your CRM system to track your project. So because we know that a lot of, let's say, large operations are incentive-based or incentive-oriented, you can also track performance of those incentives and ultimately how they're trending towards that incentive or full incentive to be obtained. You can track how the company is growing and are they ultimately fulfilling all the obligations that are considered for a particular support or incentive program. In terms of some other tools that we use internally, and this is not to promote any database provider or platform provider, but in terms of business intelligence or simply commercial databases, there's FDI 365, which is our own platform. There's also some other large databases out there, such as Dun & Bradstreet, which a lot of probably is Hoover's. Compass is also another very, very useful database. It's more European-oriented, I guess you could say. Factiva, it's a fantastic tool. Also does have a commercial database in there, but it also can generate a lot of global news from premium sources, so ultimately from sources that you cannot find anywhere else online. FDI Professionals is a tool that is provided by our sister company called WavTech from the UK, and it's ultimately a database of location advisors as well as influencers. And then there's some other databases out there such as Crunchbase and PitchBook, which are more venture capital oriented. FDI Markets, which is a database developed by Financial Times, the parent company of JS Planning, and it's ultimately a tool that tracks all the foreign direct investments per state on a global basis. And Sales Navigator is obviously a LinkedIn, enhanced tool that keeps you up to date. It also can, keep you up to date with some news on companies, on profiles, meaning contacts that you're following, but also gives you a lot of search capabilities that is attached to LinkedIn and company profiles. Efficiency tools. So there's another tool that was developed by WavTech. It's called Incentives Monitor. So it's a unique global database that tracks incentives. So this is very good if you're ever trying to benchmark yourself against your competing regions and ultimately what they're handing out in incentives. FDI accounting, it's a software and data tool that tracks, measures inward investment success stories. This is also very useful, obviously, if you'd like to see how you're trending against some of your competitors. FDI Benchmark is another Financial Times tool that it's just fantastic to use. It has just over 1,000 data points, both related to cost and quality, that can easily compare your region to your competitors. I strongly suggest this tool to be used for follow-up meetings. So let's say, you had a discovery or introductory meeting with a potential investor from I don't know, the Netherlands, let's say, and they're looking into your region as well as 2-3 other states. This is a fantastic way to, obtain that second follow-up meeting by providing a benchmark study of your particular region against those 2-3 competing states that were mentioned in the first meeting or first appointment. Then there's some efficiency tools that just help you generate emails better, such as Get Email and Hunter, if you ever do lead generation on your own. If you're doing a lot of research, meaning opening companies' websites from an Excel file, trying to sort of determine what would be a good fit, there's Bulk URL Opener and some other similar tools to that, as well as Data Knives, which is an attachment to could be Excel, could be also your Chrome, and it just gives you insights on a company when you actually land on their corporate website. It gives you information on the number of employees, number of locations, revenue, executives, and things like that. If that is not available on the website. So the last is ultimately the summary. So 4 steps, ultimately do your research, and prepare that product and that offering that you want to do, that you want to showcase in front of your potential investors. So plan for your markets that you're going to be targeting, as well as the industries. Perhaps hire a consultant to work on your strategy plan. When it comes to execution and when it comes to results, again, use your CRM system to really have that 360-degree views, perhaps something that you need to present to your board or your potential investors. See how your team is tracking and ultimately gain, again, that bird's eye view on how you're tracking against your competitors. So again, thank you guys. Thank you so much for your time. And this was just a brief overview of some of our training that we do for FDI investment attraction.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much for that. That was excellent. And again, I just want to remind our listeners that they can enter any questions that they have in the questions field in the GoToWebinar control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. And so with that, I'm going to turn this over to Stevie Field-Chavez. I'm sorry, Stevie. I need this to be a full name. And I know, Stevie, that we were thinking of starting off this section with a poll. Are we still good to do that?
Yes, I think that's a great time.
Okay, so what I'm going to encourage you guys to do is take a look on your screen. You're going to see that we've got a poll there. We're going to ask you to answer for us what kind of lead generation programs that you may have done as an organization. And we invite you to check one of the following answers, whether you've done a full-scale formal lead generation program that you contracted an external expert to work with you on that. Maybe you chose to do a full-scale formal lead gen program that you managed in-house. Maybe you were just doing informal lead generation initiatives on your own. maybe you did no real lead generation program at all, or maybe this doesn't actually apply to your organization. So we've got about half the votes in. I'm going to encourage the others. Okay, they're coming in pretty quickly. And then it'll be interesting to take a look and see what the many attendees in today's session actually chose to do for your particular organization. We'd like to see, just so we get a sense how we can tailor this data to you. Okay, so I am going to close this poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Excellent. So let's take a look at the results. We can see that almost 40% chose to do a full-scale formal lead gen program that you contracted with another organization to do. 6% of you tried to do a full-scale formal lead gen program entirely on your own. I give you hat tip for that because I know it's a big project. Roughly 20% were doing informal lead generation initiatives on your own, and about 30% were doing you've not done any real lead generation program at all. Excellent. Okay, well, thank you very much for sharing that. We're going to have one more poll at the end, but before let me pass this over to Stevie. There, I think we can see Stevie's screen again.
You want to see it? Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, with that, I'm just going to go ahead and jump into that. The poll was very interesting. I appreciate as well just the ability to see what other economic development organizations are doing in terms of lead generation. Part of the lead generation effort is as well, after you've met with this client, you've done your research, you've made your contact, you've met with this potential business who may be considering expanding or relocating to your community. And so one of the things that happens is very often they'll do their research on you. And so our segment of this webinar is really going to be, what are they going to find when they start doing their research on your community? Do you have a sites and buildings application? Do you have static PDF documents or interactive data that can really be tailored to the needs of the particular business that you've met with? So we're going to kind of tootle around here on the Powering Florida GIS application. This is through Florida Power and Light. It has a few great new features. It's on our brand new dynamic platform. And so for those of you who are clients and you don't have this new platform, just give us a call or send us an email. We can update you on this, get this transferred over to you. And but we're going to take it away and just kind of start tootling around and see what we can find out about these communities. So we're going to walk through this as if we're doing our research on specific counties within the state and see what kind of data we can find out. As you can see here, I started looking at Orange County, Florida. That is home of Disney World and Orlando. I thought that would be a great place to just start, but I can search by any city, county, or region statewide. I can also search by buildings or sites, various size of square feet or acres, depending upon building or land options, for sale or for lease, and specific building types or land types, and then address name, lease rate, sales rate, ceiling height, keywords. Keywords is always important because if you have a client or a company that you're working with and they're maybe only interested in properties in the opportunity zone area, you can actually enter opportunity zone here and it will filter out anything that is not in an opportunity zone or rail served. There's of course any kind of keywords you can think of. It will just really help narrow down that search. So from our search filters, we've got various options here that have come up as potential opportunities for business relocation or expansion. A couple of these I've gone ahead and saved just because I know that we have limited time here. And so one of the neat little features about this application is it allows me to save the results in different folders. So I have multiple folders. This one's called Project Lead Gen, and I've saved a couple properties so I can actually review these on my own. If you're working with a potential interested business that for your community, the neat thing about sharing and saving these properties is now I can actually send them an email or send them a link with this folder of populated properties and all of the data that comes with that. I email. I can copy and rename this link and embed it in an email or an electronic newsletter, or post on social media any new properties that I've had come on board. It's also very possible that a client may not understand or know where they're going to go. So I've got a couple screens open here just to so this allows us to actually draw an area on the map. You know, especially for international businesses and companies, they don't know where city and county lines are, and they're just really looking for the right place for their business expansion. And so by just highlighting an area where I know I might want to be, I can apply this filter to my search, and only the buildings and the properties that actually were in my criteria are going to populate this application. I think I had a pretty big area, so there's a little bit of a delay. I can hear it thinking, and it's part of the webinar thing. So that is the beauty of having two screens open, is we're just going to toggle back and forth. So let's take a look at some of the information on this property. We'll look at 111 here. And so here's a little information about this particular building to include property details. I can look at the city and county profile. This is really helpful because it's going to give me an aggregate of all of the community information. We'll take a look at what this looks like here shortly. I have property availability information, building details, and I have my contact information here, both economic development contact person as well as the broker or property management company. So I've already got my resources, and I've only had to be on one site. I've only made a few clicks, and I've already got the resources of who to contact for more information. But let's take a look at some of the supporting data that also comes with this search. So Florida Power and Light has our EMSI or MZ data. This is going to show our occupation information, jobs by occupation, from 0 to 60 minutes and 0 to 60 miles. This little button over here will take you to our thematic map or heat maps, which is just another way to look at the same types of data. You'll see in many of our different reports that we have multiple ways to look at the same information as people absorb data differently. So this allows us to see it in more of a visual format. We also have our demographic and our consumer expenditure information. These pieces of information here are brought to you by Applied Geographic Solutions, or AGS, out of Thousand Oaks, California, and updated 2 times annually. You can see our 2019 as well as our projected 2024 information. As we showed earlier, we've got the ability to look at that in heat map. And for these reports, we also have the ability to look at this in a graph form. So I can just really kind of hone down into data and what makes this community maybe characteristically look like a community that I want to expand in. I can also modify my distance, 0 to 60 minutes, 0 to 60 miles, and my data will automatically change. Our consumer expenditures, that's going to show us where our residents are spending their money. So I can see on, you know, what items. I always tend to look at the women's apparel. I don't know why, it's a little personal to me, I guess. But again, it's going to break out where our residents are spending their money and for what: education, food and beverage, gifts, etc. Our wage and salary information is provided by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and is going to be updated 1 time annually. This breaks out our mean and median hourly and annual wages. So this gives me a really great idea of what the local businesses are paying their management occupations in different categories. So I can really find out if I'm online for the wages that I'm looking at paying in this potential expansion. Our business data is very interesting. It's one of my favorite reports. This is going to break out where our businesses are within a user entered radius. So this is going to be pretty populated here. We're right in downtown Orlando, so it's taking just a little bit of a second. But you can see all of our little dots indicate a different business or a different industry, and I can even see the names of the businesses that are located here. But I can also search by number of employees, minimum and maximum, annual revenue, various NAICS codes. And so this is going to give us our 2-digit, our 4-digit, and our 6-digit NAICS code. So I always like the professional and scientific category. So I can see our 2-digit Here's our 4-digit, and then we're going to have our 6-digit NAICS code. And I tend to, I'm not quite sure why I did it, but I hit the one that had the most results, so it will take a second for that to populate. But you can see, I can actually see the names of the companies. On your map, they will show where these companies are located. One of the really great things that Florida Power and Light has done in their application, and this goes right into what Davor and Amber were talking about, is they're tracking actual FDI data, FDI projects, and what kind of projects have invested in the greater Orlando area. So our default here is 10 miles, and you can see we have our country of origin, the projects that have come from this country, number of jobs, and actual investment. So I can track this by both country and by sector, but by seeing, you know, I've got a lead gen program maybe in Germany, so I can kind of hone in and see what other companies have invested from Germany in maybe my actual fields, so I can see the names of these companies. And this is city data, so the information, while it doesn't map, we can see where these are by heat signature. So you can see where our concentration of German investment would be located. And again, this does provide the company name. This information is 7 years of information. It's updated quarterly, and it's provided to us by FDI Markets. So we're really kind of now being able to hone in on other investment, which just furthers your method or your efforts to sharing why your community is such the right location for this potential business. Here's our sector information, which is going to break down by actual sector type and then the country of origin. We also have our talent data. Our talent data is going to map our learning institutions. So I understand I've got this business that I'm thinking of relocating or expanding to your community, and I want to make sure that we've got the talent that's needed to work at my company. And so this is going to show us the learning institutions within a 50-mile radius, although I do believe this goes up to 90 miles. It's going to break out our top 5 programs by number of graduates, our top universities by number of graduates, and then we're also going to actually have a breakdown of our graduates and the field of study to which these degrees are coming. So here I have our speech, communication, and rhetoric. I'm going to click this with my mouse, and it's going to populate on our map, and it's going to show me the top learning institutions to where these, from which these degrees are coming from, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, and so I can see where they're located. So I can see what I'm in the right distance to actually start recruiting some of this workforce. I also mentioned that we had our city and county profile information, which is an aggregate of all of the information shown. So this is going to show us not only the outline of a community, which is really important. A lot of you who have been doing lead gen programs before understand that I tend to click when my computer takes a bit of a moment. Understand that people in other countries may not know where, not only they don't know where Orange County is, they may not know where South Carolina is. And so the more we can visually show where our locations are and what we're doing, I think is a very big benefit. Here it's going to provide us our population, median age. We also have our just age and how that's changed over the years, as well as educational attainment, labor force. You can see there's interactivity. You know, it's really important when we talk about these interactive and dynamic reports. If you have those static PDFs on your website, you know, they work to a point. It's making sure the information is sourced, making sure the information is current. Anything more than a year old is just old data. There's always newer and fresher numbers out there, so make sure your data comes from a reliable source. It should be sourced at the bottom of the report. Interactivity is good. As you can see with the business report that we were in earlier, we were able to get information about specific business categories that met the criteria of what kind of business I'm in. So it really kind of is customized for the end user of your website. And then with all of this come your dynamic analytics, your analytics, which actually show you that your website is working and the companies who are on your website by company name. So if you've met with a company overseas and you've been sharing about the benefits of your community, these reports will let you know that this company was on your website, which properties they were looking at, their the search ranges of size of property, and then the different intelligence reports that they've also had interest in. Alissa, I'm going to throw this back to you. Do we have any questions? I've thrown a lot of information out there on just interactive data and site selection. Do we have any questions?
Well, before we get to questions, and I will remind people to take a look at the questions on the right-hand side of their screen, I just wanted to say a couple things about lead generation and your economic development website. So I'm just going to grab this back from you, Stevie.
Sure.
Let's see. Okay. So some of the things that we want to say, once you're doing all of this work to drive more leads back to your organization, to be in discussion with you, to consider your region for investment, there are some things that, you know, Stevie's been showing you in terms of Zoom Prospector, but also our intelligence components, that things that you really want to make sure you have on your website. First of all, obviously, you need that robust, up-to-date, interactive site selection data. You need the ability to map businesses and industries so that people can see what's there in terms of competitors, suppliers, supply chain. They want to be able to search a commercial sites and buildings database to look at different locations. They're looking for data about labor force and talent pool. And then really importantly, they need to be able to drill down into this data. So you really do not want to have old school static PDFs that send them off of your website in the first place. That's the worst thing you could do. They want to be able to drill in. They want to look at use the different map tools. They want to visualize it. They want to be able to download it and share it in different kinds of ways. And that shareability needs to happen in different formats. So social is one of them, but obviously being able to email them, being able to select links that show off that custom analysis, exporting data in a variety of different ways is really critical. And this really, I shouldn't have to say this, but it's often very challenging to find contact information on economic development websites. You need a very clear contact us form. Ideally, you will have a person associated with that and not just an info at email address. It is so much better if we can personalize things, have the names of the people on your team and their contact information, telephone number that people can reach out to you. Then finally, we want those analytics to track who's on your website. If you're going to be putting all of this effort into driving more interested prospects to check you out, they may meet with you, obviously, face-to-face. That would be wonderful if that happens at trade shows. You may have meetings set up, but oftentimes they're checking you out online as well, and you really need to be able to know that. And so one of the things that we've coded into our tools alongside the usual Google Analytics that you get with any website, and alongside our specialized economic development analytics that come with Zoom Prospector that show you which properties are searched and which communities are searched, but also now we offer Lead Gen ID, which means that we've coded the tools to show you what companies are on your website, what criteria they're searching for, what reports they viewed, what properties they viewed, so that you can then go back and, first of all, use that information in your meetings with them, but also proactively reach out to them. If they are on your website but haven't picked up the phone or emailed you, that often happens, that they start off their research online before they actually reach out to you. It just gives you that ability to shorten the sales process and reach out to them as well. And so what I'd like to do is also point out these other things. Actually, before we do our last poll, is you need the sites and buildings, the dynamic data, the easy to analyze, the easy to share, and the track of what companies are on your website and what they're actually searching. So let's take a look. We have one last poll that we'd like to do with you, and I'm going to invite you to take a look on your screen. Once you generate new leads, what kinds of data do you currently have on your website that they can find? And I invite you to vote on that one. They can find perhaps a full suite of interactive GIS site selection data tools. Maybe they'll find a basic sites and buildings database. Perhaps they will find static PDFs, data. What data? Sometimes that's the answer. And maybe this doesn't apply actually to your organization. That's basically what I'd like to see. Most of you have now voted. I'm going to give you another few seconds to get your vote in here so we can take a look at that, and then I'm going to share the poll with everyone so we can take a look at that in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, poll is closed. Let's take a look at the results that we've got, which is about 30% split across them. So 30% of people have a full suite of interactive GIS site selection data tools. 30% of you have a basic sites and buildings database, and 30% of you are offering static data in PDFs that can be downloaded. And with some of you, that's actually not applicable. Okay, interesting. So at that point, what I'd like you guys to do is consider asking any questions that you've got. I do see that there are some questions that have come in, so I'm going to take those. I'm also making sure that we have our contact information for you on the screen right now. So I've got a question for Amber and Davor. Is having FDI data on your website valuable? Is that something that you, as lead generation specialists, is that something that you would see as valuable?
Yes, I'm going to say yes. It's very valuable because obviously it helps, sort of like you were mentioning before. You know, a lot of companies are doing their own research, right? And let's say if you have you know, information broken down by country and all the foreign direct investments and projects that have landed. If you have that data, especially in some sort of statistics form, not necessarily under your news section and things like that, I would say it's very helpful to attract and identify potential foreign direct investors.
Okay, thank you. This is a really interesting question. How should smaller rural communities think about FDI data and or FDI in general and lead generation programs? Is that something that's relevant for smaller or rural communities?
Yeah, again, you know, I mean, I'm gonna give an example of you know, some of the southeastern states that have started programs back in the day, back in the, I guess, early 80s. They started establishing these relationships in Germany and northern Italy and things like that, formed a lot of offices. You know, if you just look at, you know, manufacturing projects and if where they land, they do not necessarily go into these large metro areas in North America, right? If any of you sort of visited Germany, you know, we normally say that Bavaria has a strong manufacturing cluster, especially for automotive parts and things like that. But not a lot of companies are necessarily, you know, located in Munich. They're somewhere in and around Munich. So companies from Europe are especially from Europe, are used to, you know, let's call them rural communities, smaller communities, and this is where they operate their manufacturing operations. So when they're looking for a new location to expand to, they will probably look into, you know, something similar to their domicile region. So absolutely, I think there's definitely a value proposition for smaller / rural communities in the United States and or in North America.
Thank you, Davor. Yeah, it's an interesting question. We occasionally get clients from areas that are either poorer or more rural, and they're sometimes concerned about showing their data because they think it doesn't reflect well on them. But what we always tell them is you don't know what an investment prospect is looking for. They may see that as an opportunity that will then go on to benefit your region and give people jobs and help attract different kinds of workforce. So you never really know actually what they're looking for. So sometimes that smaller or rural area is something that is actually desirable from an FDI context. We have a question. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, Deborah. Did you want to add anything?
I just said agreed.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So Sandy asks an interesting question. Given the difference in data availability between Canada and the USA, how do the data platforms transfer to a Canadian context? And Sandy, you are in luck today because you have 3 Canadians on the webinar with you today. I'm in Montreal, as are Amber and Davor. And I can tell you that in terms of the GIS platforms, we definitely have a Canadian version of the product, Student Prospector Canada, currently available in, I think we're in half of Canadian provinces right now, including Montreal, Niagara region, Abbotsford, British Columbia, really across the country. And what we're using is Environics, which is really the gold standard in data in Canada, using StatsCan data and projections. We use Infogroup Canada for the business data, and we also are happy to integrate any local data that you have. So for example, in Montreal, one of the things they provided us is a map of major projects, development projects going on in the city. So lots of different ways that we can integrate that data. And of course, the FDI data is something that we integrate through FDI markets as part of a subscription. So that is a possibility as well. Did Amber and Davor, for the Canadians on the line, is there anything that you would want to add related to lead generation for Canada?
I mean, you know, most of the commercial databases in general have some sort of either a suite, for example, you know, Incentives Monitor does come in a suite specifically for Canada. That's if you want to track, you know, incentives given out by Canadian economic development organizations. And again, you know, the majority of commercial databases, including ours, have very specific information on Canadian businesses as well as foreign direct investment tracked into the country.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions? Feel free to put that into the questions field on the right-hand side of your screen. We have a question about whether map layers is something that would be important to be able to show on an online interactive tool. Stevie, do you want to address the question about map layers?
Absolutely, and the answer is absolutely. I think that map layers are very important. Again, it's another way to visually look at specific data, whether it's wetlands or flood zones or opportunity zones. I think it's really important that you provide those points of research for those who are looking at information about your community. I can tell you that we provide a handful of map layers, but I always encourage communities to get creative with your map layers as well. If you have something that's really special for your community, you know, I'm just off the top of my head thinking maybe Nashville and the music scene, or I know Bowling Green, Kentucky did this, where they actually had little treble clefs marking some of the honky tonks and the different music venues that they have in town, bike paths if you've got a real big outdoor community. All of this feeds into that, you know, the quality of life that we're all trying to communicate that our communities all have. So map layers are a great way to do that.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. And then we have a question about downloadable reports. What kinds of formats would those reports come in?
Oh, I think, you know, the more the better. I love the share button. I think the share button is super important because you can actually just embed that in an email. Those of you who do electronic marketing, that is like gold when you're wanting to communicate something and you want people to be able to click on that and go directly to the source. We have the ability to print in a PDF file, so you can download this information and include it someplace else in a PDF, but it's still the interactive information. So you've searched and come out with a report that is exactly the type of information that you're looking for, and then you download that PDF and include that. So it's still very customized and specific.
Excellent, thank you. I think that takes us to the end of our questions. Any last thoughts or last words, Amber, Davor?
No, I think that sums it up. We wanted to, you know, me and Davor wanted to thank everyone again for, you know, joining us. these slides are going to be available. And, if ever, a lot of the times, before we even, embark in full-scale lead generation programs, we talk to clients and we kind of do, a sort of a free audit service of what, the programs they have in place and strategy, and we kind of show, how our programs can potentially tailor to what they have in place and maximize, their results. So if anyone's kind of interested, moving forward and looking at how we could maybe help you in that way, we're always here just in a consulting capacity, even before, we would even undertake a program.
Excellent. Thank you very much for joining us today, Amber and Davor. Thank you all for signing up for this webinar and attending. We really appreciate having you on board with us today. You will get an email with a link to the recorded video of today's session and to the slide deck, which Amber and Davor have agreed to share. And you'll have our contact information on there as well. So with that, I would thank you all very much, and I wish you all a wonderful afternoon. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.